going to try to do a response video to the Modern Mystic, and the anti-Kantavid guy said here, actually you see things actually you see exactly what I'm getting at. And then it says his name, Anna Kantavid. So apparently he's a Kantian. And I don't even know what that means anymore, to tell you the truth. I mean, I read some Kant, and you can't understand it. It's all this obsession about where you put your verbs and your nouns. It's just a bunch of crap, in my opinion. The only thing that makes any sense to it is there's some order to the logic, like you have a prime directive. He doesn't say this, but that's how I would state it. I'd reconfigure it. That you have this overall thing that you're trying to meet, a goal you're trying to get to. You can have these lesser goals inside of that bigger goal. Like you are confined by this bigger obligation. Like you have 10 matches and you can only use 5 of the matches. There's like a rule, that overrides your function, and so then you can work in the world with your 5 matches, but you can't cross the line and use the 6th match. So kind of by my standards would be our first obligation is to all the sentient things. We have to make them better off by existing, and that would be the prime directive. Like almost in medicine, first do no harm. Although it's not really a prime directive because it's not really related to the function of medicine, which would be make people better off in the end. But it's close to that kind of goal in the sense that you can't get to your end through a means where you cause somebody more suffering than the disease would have caused them. So the idea is to improve their condition without causing them more grief than dying would have been, kind of. And that's the trickiness of this. So my argument is that our prime directive is really simple. The prime directive is that you're a welfare organism, an organism that creates value by being able to feel. You're now important. Your welfare is meaningful. And anything that's sentient has a meaningful welfare. And the real game is to navigate through this pinball machine by improving the welfare, improving the state, the condition of as many sentients as possible, including yourself. You could do it by jumping on a grenade and saving the comfort of the families of all the men you would have saved, and all the grief and heartache and pain and all the productivity that they will produce in their life. One of them could have been the guy who cures cancer or something. So there could have been somebody very productive. You saved his life, therefore your life is more valuable. Kind of like in the It's a Wonderful Life movie. You could show yourself to be with or without you. It's that kind of thing. What would the world look like without you? And if you don't live a life where the world turns to shitville, Pottersville, where the world is broken, is lesser, because you're not there. If that's not the end result, then you haven't accomplished the prime directive. You've got to leave things better, or at least the same, as with or without you. And the net value of your contribution, that's the end, that's the prime directive, is to make value out of your existence. The secondary directive would be to maximize that influence. Okay, so it's not just that you end up having a productive life, but that you squeeze as much productivity as possible. That you don't only stop your town from turning into Pottersville, but that you, yes, stop World War IV, if it's possible. If there's a possible way to navigate your life, your existence, into jumping on the nuclear bomb that would have started in World War IV or something. If you could find that grenade to jump on, that your obligation is to jump on it. Your obligation is to maximize your functionality, maximize the productivity you can glean from this machine that your brain is controlling, that is moving. So anyway, that's how I would recontextualize Kant, and this is exactly the opposite of what Kant is. Kant is more like you get a dopey principle, you just focus on it, just keep walking it. He was one of those guys who basically said, you know, if there isn't a God, we have to invent one, because otherwise we can't somehow handle the obligation of being productive. And I think I just handled the obligation, but by defining ourselves as just recognizing ourselves as toasters, just recognizing ourselves as any kind of functional device, and that the device has an obligation to function within parameters. The lawnmower must cut a certain amount of grass per gallon of gas to be useful. Likewise, the toaster can't burn down your house or kill your children or eat the dog and make toast. It can't do both of those things. Its obligation is to make toast efficiently. And ideally, you want it to do its best. You want it to make super duper toast, or to be super duper efficient in doing that. Because the value is, again, the premise is established by this rudimentary fact that welfare of sentient beings is the thing that creates all value. Nothing has any value in the universe. No little bit of stuff moving has any consequence of any relevance until it can possibly affect something that feels. Something that can end up having a bad day. Or a worse fate is the more important word. It always has to be looked at in the entire context of a life, which is really hard to do, because sometimes you could be doing your neighbor a favor by, you know, killing his wife, because his wife was just going to be a terror and ruin his life and, you know, a whole bunch of other people, because she was just a nasty bitch. You know, but you can't know that, so then you have to act on just principles, but you have nothing else to act on. What's the probabilistic outcome? Well, the probabilistic outcome is that it's not a good idea to kill his wife. Probably she's not a succubus creating awful draconian harm in the world. But there might be pretty good evidence. But anyway, so, and that's the context of this video by the mystic, where in essence he's using determinism to somehow break down what is the significance of our individual function, the fact that we are lawnmowers. I mean, every lawnmower was created in a factory. It's a mechanical process that makes lawnmowers, but they're still required to meet the standard. They're still required to function, to do their job, or they get called broken, or they get disposed of, or they get replaced. And we still are functioning things, even though we can say it's a deterministic, materialistic, cause and effect universe that built us and constructed us. We're still performing like lawnmowers. Our jobs is directly related to this fundamental function, where we both create value and cause changes in the value state of the things we impact. And it's all one big swirl of stuff, but the value still exists in the stuff. Saying it's deterministic and cause and effect doesn't unravel the value. It doesn't mean that stuff doesn't have value, that welfare doesn't exist anymore, that pain and suffering doesn't exist anymore. And there is this implicit implication, redundancy, in this argument of the universe universing, as if we somehow, that means that some way we're not still functional parts of the universe, that we're still not gears turning, and that those gears will turn based on ideas in people's heads and notions in their head. I am reconstructed by the knowledge of the implications of my existence. I behave differently than I would have behaved because I have this context of understanding of my obligations. I mean, there's no point in having a sense of duty if you've wrongly defined your duty. So let's play this and see if we can make anything out of it.
Hello, YouTube video in reply to Smiling Andy's latest video, which I think was entitled something like Riders on the Storm, where he asks, knocking determinism, if determinism states that, I don't know what, who's being tricked is the basic question in the video. Who is being fooled into believing that they exist and calling it an infinite regression? No.
Yeah, well, that's the problem, though. Who's being fooled into thinking they exist? I don't have to make an argument about my theyness. It doesn't theoretically matter what my origin is. It doesn't matter that the dog made the tail. The tail still has to function as a tail. It can't just sit around and say, I'm not going to play.
Well, it's right there, isn't it? The infinite regression is quite easy for a determinist, let's say, that says, well, consciousness even is an illusion. And then you ask, well, who is being eluded or deluded?
Yeah, okay, so it's an illusion, but like in Einstein logic, it's one hell of an illusion. Why do we really have to argue about establishing a fact that there's intrinsic value in the difference we can weigh between feeling really good and feeling really bad? I mean, if this premise can't be accepted, that these are things we could put on a theoretical scale, and that we could tell the weight difference of them, that one is like helium and one is lead. I mean, one is decidedly not good, down, and one is good, up. One is closer to something not negative, is further away from negative, and the other one is closer to negative or not encourageable, or not beneficial, or not better, less better, and the other is better. Whatever word you want to use for this relative difference for these things, and we can tell the relative difference, and we can establish that it's good to have more of this better stuff than this lesser stuff. Do I have to do that over and over and over again just to establish the fact of having some point in having any opinions whatsoever or any conversation whatsoever? I mean, this argument is just so fucking irritating. I mean, I never thought in my life, ever, in my whole progression as a living thing, that I would ever have to explain to people that suffering fucking sucks. I mean, that I have to argue it. I have to get on a podium and explain suffering sucks. Let's have less of that.
Eluded by whatever it is, and you've got an infinite regression. But Andy, dear, you answered it in your last video, the one before this, the very short one to Professor Anton. In determinism, there is nobody. So there is nobody to be tricked.
Okay, so there's no body. I guess it just, why am I supposed to find that impressive? Or why is that supposed to go, oh wow, eureka, isn't that interesting? There's no individual gear work inside the watch. No, there are individual gears inside the watch. And if you reshape the gear, the watch will tell a different time. If you reshape the formation of these human constructs, they will behave differently, and they will tell a better time. If you mesh the gears are all on a standard, and all the gears mesh instead of being eccentric to each other, it will tell a better time. It will more smoothly function. If you oil them, with knowledge, let's call it, or something. If you lubricate them with mechanisms that allow them to transfer standards and knowledge to each other so they can fix their own So their gears are modified through that process, and that the irregularities are compensated for by a translation language, we could call it, or translation memes or norms, or something else that allows for a cushioning between the gears, so now they do run and they don't snag on each other and stop the watch. I mean, why am I supposed to think that because it's one big mechanism that somehow the parts still don't have to function to preserve what we should be able to establish as a value produced by the mechanism itself? The mechanism of the universe is producing conscious welfares. It's producing sentient experience. It is now the universe's obligation to do that, to burn the fuel of suffering and produce the joy of experience in some sort of efficient manner, to be qualified as bad or better. And through our conversation, we change that gear work through an automatic process, a process we don't control. There's no we controlling it. There's no spontaneous extra energy that comes in and gives it guidance. But we know that logic, like biology, evolves, and that it becomes cleaner through more and more precise filtering, more and more precise language and word usage, that the communication becomes more pure and functional, and that this mechanism can be made more efficient. We figured out the inefficiency of the slavery and said, this is not something to be doing. This is a gear that is creating no good in the mechanism. And we, as a collective, the watch itself, rejected that gear. The universe rejected slavery. And it rejected it through individuals and a social collective, where memes and a thought and an idea, a rejection, a repulsion built up in people, and they force the gear out. This is the mechanism. It works through us. The universe isn't a thing that we are controlled by. We are the parts that control it, in a sense. It is through us the universe functions.
So there's no infinite regression. There is just nobody. So you go, well, and you'll be able to easily take the high ground, or the majority ground, by saying, well, who are you? Who am I? Who are they? And everyone will rally round, and that's fair enough. But the deterministic answer is nobody, 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 nobody.
Well, I'm sorry. I mean, nobody just sounds like baby talk. What do I do? It sounds like woo-woo. It sounds like some sort of religious doctrine from Hookah that tells me I must bow on the great Monoko and speak the magic Hikiti. I mean, what the fuck does that mean? No body. I am a body. I am the nozzle of consciousness. I'm shooting consciousness into the non-material dimension. The vibration has a meaning. The arrangement of matter that creates this illusion of sensation is significant. You're going to say it's not okay, then there's just no conversation. I mean, if you're going to sit there and pretend that because it doesn't have, you can't pick it up on a radio, there's no signal. Well, there's a signal. It doesn't travel through a material dimension, but the signal of value created by our welfare, created by the fact that there is a decidedly detectable difference that we personally experience the scale moving. Okay, it's not a material scale. You can't put pain, suffering, and pleasure on a scale and measure it external to a consciousness. It can only be measured inside of a consciousness. But the fact is, I have the scale. I've seen the scale function. It's there. You want to say it isn't there? How can you possibly how can it's I would say it's an insane accusation, because you know it yourself. You've spoken to this God. You have spoken to the God of sentience. This God exists. This non-material, supernatural, non-material thing, you have personal fellowship with it. You have intimate contact with it. It's insane to say it doesn't exist, that it's a nobody. No, it's a somebody. The function of consciousness makes me a something. No, it's a somebody. The function of consciousness makes me a something.
There is nothing. There is just, if there is anything, and we're keeping a bit of logic together here and saying there is something, there is one thing and one thing only. There is the universe.
Well, again, it's just the universe. If you take the watch metaphor and let's bend it into something creating this ether. So it's an ether machine. It creates puffs of invisible, non-material gas that has huge displacement weight, or it doesn't materially contact, but it has a detectable reality. So maybe it's through one mechanism. Maybe it has a gravity, or maybe it just displaces empty space and replaces it with double empty space. It just doesn't matter. It is detectable through this consciousness mechanism. And so we have we're all these little nipples on a ball, each little consciousness, and it's poofing out this gas of pain and pleasure, of comfort and discomfort. And this gas is a reality. It's now part of the universe. Okay, the universe isn't just the matter. The universe is also this gas of conscious experience that's being poofed out. That's part of the ether, and that has to be accounted for. That each nozzle is being controlled by the universe. Each nozzle is being controlled by the interactions with the other nozzles. There's all kinds of feedback mechanisms controlling the poofing of the frickin' consciousness gas. But it's still from another dimension of viewpoint, from a dimension external to the universe and the poofing gas, looking at the mechanism. You can still point to nozzles. You can still see their function. It doesn't really matter what causes them to function. It only matters is that they're producing this gas, and they can produce more of it or less of it based on how they interact with each other, and that's going to be controlled by a process of evolution, an evolution of knowledge and understanding and perspective, built upon an evolutionary nature, okay, that we have substantially overcome. I mean, even religious people are essentially overcoming their nature. They're just doing it badly with rubbish, garbage knowledge. But taken to its logical conclusion, the development of this understanding of our role, the fact that we are producing this value gas, and that this value gas has a decidedly better and worse element to it, and that you want to produce more of the white gas than the well, let's not use black and white, but more of the light gas than the heavy gas. The anti, the positive and the anti. It's probably a better analogy that does have something to do with this idea that there is no true positive, that there's just, reducing the negative or having a gas that suppresses the negative. But I don't want to get this really strangled. I just want to get to the point that there's value being created in this universe, and that this nobody thing only works if you're just talking about material machines for which there's no distinction. There's a distinction between my computer and me. There's a distinction between the mouse and me, the car and me, all other mechanical devices and me. We can see the distinction, we can label it, and we can understand that it's an important distinction. And the distinction is not a matter of biological parts, it's not a matter of atoms and molecules and electrons and all that crap. It's a matter of arrangement, and it creates something quite different in me than exists in those things. I can have a lump of gray matter, I can have a brain and put it on a plate, and it's not going to be doing anything. Even though it's the same matter, it's just not going to do anything. I can put this one into a sleep state, and it won't be doing any of this consciousness thing. It'll be in the off position. Yeah, I can stick I can just do a simple injury to it and turn it off. It's very different than these other physical things. So just talking about mattering falls so short of what it of accounting. You've got to do something to account for the recognizable distinction between me and other machines. Consciousness is a definable distinction. It's not a ignorable difference. It's a difference, and it's not a material difference, it's a functional difference that creates something that doesn't have a material identity. Arrangement is not a material identity, but it obviously has a significant impact. It makes a significant difference. I would argue it makes all the difference, even though it has no material weight difference. There's no difference between the weight of a brain working and a brain not working. It's the same weight, it's the same matter. It's just that one is working because of the arrangement. One is on and one is off. And we can see the difference between on and off. And so that must be part of the universe. You have to accept consciousness as part of the universe and not just something you can call an illusion and wipe it off the board. But I mean, I just think it is semi-preposterous of you to point your finger at me and say nobody. I just think you got to do a lot better than that. That's kind of an extraordinary claim. I mean, if you're going to extraordinarily claim that my function, my gear turning, make the universe produce consciousness is nothing, I'm just going to call bullshit on that. Sorry, but yeah, no sale. I don't know why that popped up, but whatever. Yeah, I don't know. It's strange. It's my toolbar. I don't really know why it's there. But anyway, so I think that's enough. Yeah, you got to do better than this. Nobody. No. Might not be a body. I might not be a somebody, but I'm a something.